time consuming about caring in public.
Because your physical strength against what you are doing.
That is not possible.
Let's go. Welcome back to the Elite Educators. As you know, the Elite Educators is a group of student teachers who meet every week to discuss important matters, social issues, concepts, and just to share ideas, especially those regarding education. This week, our participants will be talking about the sociology of education. What does it mean? What does it imply for society? And how does it make them feel? Without further ado, let's meet our chairperson as she introduces this week's topic to our participants.
Hello, I am Nicolene Golongwane. I am part of the Elite Educators group. I'm here to chair the whole thing. What we are basically focusing on is the whole view of sociology and its relationship with education. So now, we're almost ready to present our cases, to present our views, to give back to the community, to give back to society. Yay! But yeah, so we have the functionalist view, we have the conflict view. So now we're going to move on from the views of gender on both those theories to critiquing those views.
Socially constructed definition of women and men. It is not the same as sex, which characterizes women and men. Gender is determined by the conception of task, functions, and roles played in the society, public or private life. Sexual orientation, by and large sense, is social and social constructs amongst guys and females. It is for the most part about manliness and womanliness. It isn't straightforwardly about organic sex. All things considered, sex for most parts is comprehended as sexual action in the present world. Despite the fact that it implies organic sex in this way, having penis or having vagina does not simply mean that you are a woman or you are a man.
Gender involves social norms, attitude, and activities that society deems more appropriate for one sex over another. Gender is also determined by what an individual feels or does. The sociology of gender is also examined by how society influences our understanding and perception of differences between masculinity and femininity. We examine this in turn influences identity and social practices. We pay special focus on the power relationships that follow from
After having defined how sociologists view gender, this week's participants decided to make a poster demonstrating their understanding of what sociologists really had to say about gender. After this, they were split into two teams. Firstly, the conflict theorist view of gender, and the other, the functionalist view of gender. Each individual member of both teams decided to research their respective views and have decided to share what they have found. This part of our poster shows how we see the way functionalists view gender. It shows the many pictures of how children are even conditioned to believe in this.
In the early 1950s and 1960s, functionalism was largely dominant within sociology, and it contributed to sociological understandings of differences between men and women as socially constructed. Before the concept of gender came into sociological usage in the 1970s, mid-century functionalists talked about sex role differences. American sociologist Talcott Parsons is the major figure within 20th century functionalism. It is Parsons and Baines' 1956 view of women and men's complementary roles that are taken as the key statement of functionalist ideas about gender. Writing in the 1950s, Parsons argues that modern social life, and in particular the modern organization of work as separate from home, means that someone needs to stay home to take care of young children and perform the important early Writing in the 1950s, Parsons argues that modern social life, and in particular the modern organization of work as separate from home, means that someone has to stay home to take care for the young children and perform the important early socializations of human infants. This emotional expressive role is assigned to women, and the rational, instrumental, or goal-focused role of paid work is associated with men. These gender roles become social norms, and Parsons carefully describes how children are socialized into them. Therefore, the functionalist theory on gender looks into social groups and social processes to explain women's and men's gender roles and social positions. Thank you.
Functionalism is a clear division of male roles and female roles in the society. Males are expected to provide and protect in the society. Females are expected to be obedient workers in the society. In a school context, you will find in a classroom female learners cleaning and mopping up the floor. You'll find male students doing the minor chores, such as only cleaning windows and moving the desk. Moving a desk needs power. So the patriarchy there is that women cannot do things that requires a lot of strength or power, but only males can do that. Then if you look at it in a political context, in a leadership context, you'll find that in South Africa, for example, throughout the years in history, it has been always male who has been president of this country. There's never been a female president. So that says or promotes a certain idea about male dominance. So functionalism, you find that in families the father is in control. You find that in the community a mayor is a male person. You find that in a province level, you find that the minister of the province is a male. You find that the president in the country is a male. Also, tradition and culture in the South African context has an influence in this functionalism, because traditions are the ones that at a younger age promotes the idea that women should do the domestic chores at home, cook, clean, and you find that males they get to do the things that requires strength. So when you grow up, you have this mentality that if you're a woman, that you have to be obedient to a male, and you have to do things that don't require a lot of your strength, things that won't promote your intelligence or your leadership qualities. So it's only males that we think in South African context are to be leaders or are meant to be leaders.
If you look at the movies and the stories that we hear as children, stories like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, where a woman waits to be saved. A woman is always seen as this demure and quiet being who waits to be saved, whereas the man is the one who does the saving. He is valiant. He is strong. He does the saving. It doesn't really teach girls to go out there and to get the things that they want for themselves, you know? And I think that's highly problematic. I mean, why are we teaching girls these things? It makes even young boys see women differently. You know, young boys grow up with this idea that they have to be stronger, you know, that they have to prove their manhood by being strong and fast and all these things. And it makes them even believe that they are almost better than women, you know. You can also look at how in some Middle Eastern communities, if a man wants to divorce his wife, he can do so without any questions asked. Whereas if a woman wants to divorce her husband, she has to go through an incredibly tedious process, and she is constantly badgered with questions as to why she wants to divorce him. And these two processes, you can see that they're not the same at all. You know, they don't have, the man and the woman, they don't have the same kinds of freedoms. The functionalist view of gender is actually evident in the very world that we live in today. If you look at how Talcott Parsons describes what the functionalist view is. He says that both men and women possess specific qualities that make them excellent in specific events. So he proposes that men are good for instrumental roles. So that would be providing financial security for their families and whatsoever. And women have expressive roles, which is just to provide, well, not just, but it's to provide care. So he talks about how in functionalism, everything that happens is for the good of society, it's for the good of community. He says that functionalism focuses on gender-specific education, which is where I think it falls short. I am offering a critique. So he emphasizes that functionalism is highly dependent on gender-specific education, and that's where I think it falls short, because I believe that functionalism really, it actually underestimates both men and women. It underestimates the man's ability to be a caregiver. You know, who's to say fathers can't be good at staying home and feeding their kids and cleaning and cooking? And it undermines the woman's ability to go out there and to be the breadwinner. And why is that really? Why does it underestimate both sexes so much? I think it is sexist. I think it's misogynistic. And it's divisive. It's
said that men are supposed to provide and the woman has to stay at home looking for the children and keep the house. And functionalists critique that functionalism focuses too much on the positive side, while they're ignoring the negative side. For example, in the traditional family, the women are oppressed as they're expected to play a fulfilled housewife role, and which make them automatically dependent on the men for income. For instance, if the woman wants to buy some clothes, each and every time he has to ask money from her husband to give her money, because she can't buy anything because she doesn't have any money. They also, and the function also ignore that the dark side that of the family, which promotes a domestic violence. Their argument could be summarized as claiming that sex role difference continue to exist because they are functioning to promote a social stability, whether this was intended or unintended. Function of sex role was to understand and complement the role performed by a woman and a man as their functions to keep a society run smooth.
Our critiques about functionalism is that it promotes dominance of men over women, and it promotes obedient mentality of women. Women are being indoctrinated the idea that they must become obedient towards males, and males and young males they are indoctrinated the idea that they're the one who always have power and they're the one who always be in control of everything.
This part of our poster demonstrates our interpretation of how conflict theorists view gender.
Humble greetings to you all. It is such an accolade to be presenting about the conflict theorist view based on gender. Conflict theorists define the society as the struggle for dominance among social groups that are competing for inadequate or basically scarce resources. In the context of gender, conflict theorists argues that gender is best understood as men attempting or trying to maintain power and privileges to the disadvantage of women. In most cases, men are seen as superior than women in such an extent that in most of our communities, it is only men who lead almost everything. For instance, in churches, you will find that the pastor is a male. You will find that in this chieftaincy matter, it is only men who are leaders of the villages or tribes. Even in the kingdoms, per se. It is only male, or it has been always the matter of men leading the kingdoms. As you know that it's historically it's been your Senza Makona, your Shaka Zulu, and then there is now King Zwelithini. So there has never been an instance whereby a woman leads a kingdom. According to the conflict theorists, this belief that men are superior or men are much bigger than women is inevitable, which means that it is not yet to be over, simply because this thing of being superior in males or in men, it's it gets instilled from birth, meaning that when a boy is born in most families, it is celebrated. You know, he'll be like celebrated. Say people will be saying that you've given the family an heir. Come a stance whereby you give birth to a baby girl, then it will be like, oh, it's a baby girl. Oh, indeed, she's going to marry on another family, the in-laws, and so on. So a baby boy is always celebrated. And then in most families, men are seen superior because of the physical duties that they are able to perform. And then specifically in most communities, duties are specified or are categorized into two, whereby there are masculine duties and then feminine duties, whereby in the masculine manner it is only about physical. Men will be building houses, men will be yeah, and then in females, it is just those soft duties of looking after children, cleaning, cooking, washing, and doing all of that stuff. So automatically men are seen to be superior. And then Val. So furthermore, this idea of men being superior has been orchestrated in our minds, and then us as women, we've come to a point whereby we accept that men are superior than us, and then we just bow towards that. We no longer have a say, because it's like we now understand, or we just have accepted the fact that they are superior. And then as our chart here is portraying, yes, there is a high competition in resources in terms of men and women, and then you find that men are always winning. Men are always competing for power, they are maintaining their privileges and so on. So yeah, our chart is portraying all of what I've just talked about.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is September Kozwayo. I greet you all. My argument today is based on conflict theorist view on gender. To add on what my fellow mates stated, based on conflict theorist view on gender, I support the argument because as it is known that in most cultures, men are historically dominant until fairly recently contemporary society. Women in southern cultures could not vote or hold property, of which forced them one way or another to be dependent on men. And that became their weakness of being subordinate under the dominant men. Coming into contemporary society, or in a modern way of doing things according to conflict theorist view. Looking in terms of modern or contemporary conflict theorists, they argue that women are now being able to be dominant in a family, in the context of family structure, because when women became wage earners, they became dominant in a family. At some point, they also create more democratic arrangement within the family structure, although they may still carry the majority of the domestic burden. As we know that in South Africa or globally, worldwide, this theme of patriarchy is still going on even today. By that way, we need to get some solutions to eradicate such thing, because we need to be equal as a citizen of a country. Thank you.
Basically, it is from an economic point of view, which is very political as it looks at the unevenness in society. Firstly, it looks at the point of view that Karl Marx presents, which is very limited. Limited in the sense that it does not speak to race or gender. But it mainly focuses on the economic issues that society faces. As much as we do speak of conflict theory in society, the view of Karl Marx is limited in the sense that it speaks only to economic issues. And then when we further look at the point of view of Weber, the limitations found there is that yes, he does include gender and he does touch on race, but he does not realize or come to the realization that there are people who do not see conflict between races. They do not see conflict between their gender roles. There are women who are happy to be at home. There are women who understand the roles at home. In fact, they were raised like that. And then when we move on to look at the point of view of males, we can critique it and say that it's not every worker who's unhappy about being a worker. It's not everyone who's not happy about not being in management. It's not everyone who's not happy about not being the CEO. This critique actually looks at the pessimistic view that it brings in society. And it does not give solutions. Yes, it points out the bad, but what about the good? What are the solutions for the conflict? I am Nicolene. Thank you.
Conflict theory is criticized precisely because conflict theories focus strongly on issues such as gender, racial inequalities, without even mentioning the initiatives that are brought forward in addressing those issues. There are numerous organizations which advocate for equality, such as international labor organizations, which promote equal opportunities for both women and men in the working sector. And then in addressing racial inequalities, there are organizations as well, such as the Institute of Race, Equity and Human Rights, which promote racial equality. And then what happens is conflict theorists, they don't even recognize the effort or acknowledge the effort brought forward by those organizations in ensuring the equality in gender and in race. So hence that's why they are being criticized. Furthermore, they intend to exaggerate the problems of economic inequalities. Yes, there are problems of economic inequalities, but they pretend as if nothing is being done to address those issues. And they focus strongly at micro level, disagreements and competition. So in the light of what I've mentioned, one would come to the conclusion that indeed conflict theorists, they focus only on negative aspects and shy away from the positive aspect, hence that's why their theory is being criticized. Thank you.